You've spent your entire life feeling like something was wrong with you, but you couldn't explain what. Maybe you grew up thinking you were too sensitive, too difficult, or never enough. The truth nobody told you is this: narcissistic parents don't raise children, they manufacture extensions of themselves. If you feel like you can never be authentic, that you live in fear of disappointing others, or that your personality feels like a puzzle with pieces that don't fit together, this video will change your perspective forever. Dr. Gabor Mate, renowned trauma specialist, teaches us that trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you. And what happens inside children of narcissists is a silent and devastating reprogramming of the soul. I'm going to reveal the 7 most cruel strategies that narcissistic parents use to erase your true identity. Each of these tactics was carefully designed to keep you trapped in a system where your function is to serve, never to be. But here's what they didn't expect. When you understand the game, you can exit it. When you recognize the invisible chains, you can break them. And when you learn who you really are underneath all this toxic programming, you finally find your freedom. Get ready, because what you're about to discover will explain decades of confusion and open a completely new path for your life. The first and most devastating weapon that narcissistic parents use against you is the installation of a completely corrupted emotional operating system. They implanted systemic guilt, systemic shame, and systemic anxiety as if they were your true feelings. You weren't just taught what to feel. You were reprogrammed to feel emotions that were never yours, emotions that only served to keep the family system functioning. It's like they installed an emotional virus in your mind that makes you feel guilty every time you think about choosing yourself. You know that horrible feeling that hits your stomach when you're about to set a boundary? That internal voice that whispers you're being selfish when you finally decide to prioritize your needs? That's not your conscience speaking, it's the narcissistic programming still active in your system. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you decide not to visit your parents on a holiday because you need to rest. Immediately, a wave of guilt overwhelms you. I'm a terrible child, you think. They did so much for me. But stop for a second. What loving parent would make their child feel guilty for taking care of their own mental health? The answer is, no loving parent would do that. Only narcissistic parents program their children to feel guilt when they start having a life of their own. Dr. Gabor Mate explains that you cannot become who you must be by remaining who you are. And who you are now might just be a collection of emotional reactions that were installed in you to serve other people. The good news is that you can uninstall this emotional virus. You can learn to distinguish between your true feelings and the programmed emotions you still carry. By the way, let me ask you something quick. What city are you watching this video from? It's incredible how people from around the world are discovering these truths about their narcissistic families. But it doesn't stop there. What I'm going to reveal in the next point will show you how they stole something even more precious from you: your own identity. The second narcissistic strategy is perhaps the cruelest of all. They never allowed you to discover who you are without them. Your identity was built entirely around managing their moods, pleasing their impossible expectations, or simply surviving the constant emotional attacks. Think about it. When was the last time you made a decision thinking exclusively about what you wanted, without considering anyone's reaction? Difficult, isn't it? This happens because your internal compass was hijacked since childhood. In a narcissistic family, there exists what I call the family emotional field. It's like the entire house was a toxic Wi-Fi network that constantly transmitted, "The parent's mood is your responsibility. Their happiness depends on you. If they're doing badly, it's because you failed." You grew up being the family's emotional meteorologist. You'd wake up trying to decipher, how are the parents today? What version of them will I face? What character do I need to play to keep the peace? Dr. Gabor Mate teaches that the child cannot question the environment, so they question themselves. And that's exactly what happened to you. Instead of recognizing that your parents were emotionally unstable, you assumed you were the one who was wrong. The result? Today, you're an expert at reading other people's emotions, but completely disconnected from your own. You know exactly when someone is irritated, sad, or frustrated, but have no idea what you really like, want, or need. Many people tell me, but I know who I am. I'm someone helpful, who likes to help others. And I ask, but who would you be if no one needed your help? Who are you when you're not solving anyone's problems? The silence that follows this question is deafening, because underneath all this helper identity, this responsible one, this strong one in the family, there exists a true self that was buried decades ago. This real person, your authentic tastes, your natural boundaries, your genuine dreams, they're still there, waiting to be discovered. But first you need to understand how they programmed you to accept the abnormal as normal. The third narcissistic strategy is absolutely diabolical. They modeled dysfunction as if it were normalcy, making you believe that emotional chaos, reality denial, and excessive control were simply how life is. You absorbed this toxicity like a sponge absorbs water. Constant anxiety, walking on eggshells, hyperfunctioning, all of this became your default emotional Wi-Fi. It's what I call malignant normalcy. Think about your childhood. Were screams normal? Were punitive silences normal? Having to guess adults' moods to feel safe was normal? Of course not. But when you grow up immersed in this, your brain has no comparison parameters. It's like someone who grows up in a house with a leaky roof. For this person, it's normal to place buckets around the house when it rains. They might even find it strange to visit a house where there aren't buckets scattered in the corners. Dr. Gabor Mate explains that normal and healthy are not the same thing. In your family, normal was walking through an emotional minefield every day. Normal was measuring every word before speaking. Normal was carrying the responsibility for adults' feelings on your child's shoulders. What's most disturbing is that this toxic normalcy programming doesn't disappear when you become an adult. You unconsciously seek relationships and situations that replicate this same dysfunctional pattern because it's what feels familiar. That controlling boss? Familiar. That partner who changes moods out of nowhere? Familiar. That dynamic where you have to constantly sacrifice yourself to keep the peace? Extremely familiar. It's not that you like these situations. Your conscious mind knows they're harmful. But there's a deep part of you that recognizes these patterns as home, because that's how you learned love works. The painful truth is this: you might be recreating your narcissistic family in every aspect of your adult life without even realizing it. At work, in relationships, even in how you treat yourself. But this is about to change. Because the next pattern I'm going to reveal explains exactly how they turned you into the official emotional caretaker of the entire family, and how this is still sabotaging your life today. The fourth narcissistic tactic is turning a child into the unofficial emotional therapist of the entire family. They made you responsible for their feelings, creating a dynamic where your safety and love depended on keeping everyone emotionally stable. You became a human emotional radar. You learned to monitor every micro-expression, every change in tone, every sigh from your parents. Is he angry? Was it something I did? Is she sad? How can I fix this? This emotional hypervigilance wasn't a choice. It was a survival strategy. Children in narcissistic homes quickly discover that anticipating and managing adults' emotions is the only way to feel minimally safe. The problem is that this programming doesn't come with an expiration date. Today, at 30, 40, 50 years old, you still automatically feel responsible when someone around you is doing badly. You still obsessively monitor people's moods. You still believe it's your obligation to fix other people's feelings. Dr. Gabor Mate teaches that when a child cannot leave the disturbing environment, they leave themselves. And that's exactly what you did. You abandoned your own emotional needs to become the family's emotional stabilizer. Let me give you an example that will sound familiar. You're in a meeting and notice your boss seems irritated. Immediately, your heart races. What did I do? How can I improve the situation? Even though their irritation has absolutely nothing to do with you, your mind has already triggered the fix the moody adult protocol. Or this. Your mother calls and you can detect from her tone that something's wrong. Before she even tells you what it is, you're already mentally reorganizing your day to deal with her emotional drama. Your schedule, your plans, your needs. Everything automatically takes second place. This is what I call being other-focused instead of self-focused. You became an expert in other people's emotions, but emotionally illiterate when it comes to yourself. The sad irony is that the more you try to manage other people's emotions, the less you're able to process your own. You become a bottomless well of care for others, but completely empty when you need to care for yourself. But get ready, because the next narcissistic strategy will shock you. They used love as a weapon of control in a way that's still defining all your relationships. The fifth narcissistic strategy is perhaps the most devastating. They punished your individuality and rewarded your submission, teaching that love is conditional and that being yourself is dangerous. Every time you agreed, conformed, remained small and invisible in the parent's background, you received crumbs of what they called love. But the moment you questioned, asserted your opinion, or showed any sign of independence, punishment came quick and cruel. The result? You learned that individuality equals rejection, that having your own personality is a luxury you can't afford, that to be loved, you need to be a diminished and edited version of yourself. Dr. Gabor Mate explains that the greatest trauma for a child is having to choose between being authentic and being loved. And narcissistic parents force this impossible choice every day. Remember when you were a child and expressed a different opinion at the dinner table? The glacial silence that followed, the disapproving look, the cutting phrase, "Don't be ungrateful," or "You don't know what you're talking about"? These weren't corrections. They were punishments for daring to be yourself. On the other hand, when you blindly agreed, praised your parents, or repeated their opinions like a parrot, suddenly you were the perfect child, the pride of the family. But this love had an expiration date. It lasted only as long as you remained in the role of the parent's extension. What's most cruel is that this pattern infiltrated all your adult relationships. You still believe, deep down, that you need to be perfect to be loved, that any conflict means rejection, that disagreeing with someone can result in abandonment. So you live wearing masks. At work, you're the professional and compliant version. In relationships, you're the version that never causes problems. With friends, you're the always available and helpful version. But where are you really in all of this? The terrifying truth is that you might have spent decades without knowing your own authentic voice because you were trained to believe that this voice is unacceptable, problematic, too much. But here's what narcissistic parents didn't tell you. True love doesn't require you to disappear. Healthy relationships celebrate your individuality. They don't punish it. People who truly love you want to know who you are, not who you can pretend to be. The next pattern I'm going to reveal will show you how they trapped you in a specific role that you're still playing in every area of your life. The sixth narcissistic strategy was assigning you a fixed role within the family system. And you're still playing that character in every relationship of your adult life without even realizing it. Maybe you were the scapegoat, the one who always took the blame when things went wrong. Or the golden child, perfect on the surface, but suffocating under the pressure of carrying all the family's expectations. Maybe the caretaker, responsible for keeping everyone emotionally stable. or the lost child, invisible, forgotten, always in the background. Dr. Gabor Mate teaches us that you are not your roles, but it's easy to confuse role with identity when it's all you know. And that's exactly what happened. The role you played in childhood became your identity. If you were the scapegoat, you probably still automatically blame yourself when something goes wrong, even when it has nothing to do with you. At work, you're the first to take responsibility for the team's mistakes. In relationships, you apologize for things you didn't even do. If you were the golden child, you might be living an entire life trying to maintain an image of perfection that's impossible to sustain. You're terrified of failing, of disappointing, of showing any vulnerability. Everything looks perfect on the outside, but inside, you're exhausted. If you were the caretaker, you're still solving everyone's problems except your own. Your house has become a shelter for people in crisis. You're the unofficial psychologist for all your friends, but you can't take care of your own mental health. If you were the lost child, you're still waiting for permission to take up space in the world. You sit in the back, speak quietly, apologize for existing. Your needs always come last, if they appear at all. What's most insidious is that these roles are like clothes that got too small, but you never learned to take them off. They shaped not only how you see yourself, but how others see and treat you. You unconsciously attract people and situations that reinforce this familiar role. But here's the liberating truth. These roles are not you. They're characters that were imposed on a child who had no choice. The real you exists underneath all these layers of family performance. The next revelation will show you how they completely confused your understanding of what it means to be authentic. The seventh narcissistic strategy created devastating confusion in your mind. They taught you that emotional reactivity is authenticity, that exploding is being real, and that staying calm is being fake. You grew up in an environment where emotional intensity was confused with truth, where screaming meant brutal honesty, where constant drama was interpreted as passion, where emotional explosions were seen as having no filter, something supposedly admirable. Dr. Gabor Mate explains that feeling an emotion is not the same thing as being that emotion. But in narcissistic families, you never learned the difference. You were never taught that it's possible to feel anger without becoming the anger, that you can be sad without drowning in sadness. The result? Today you might confuse emotional explosions with authenticity. When someone irritates you, you feel you have to react intensely to be true. When you're frustrated, it seems fake to maintain composure. Calm sounds like betrayal to your nature. But here's the truth nobody told you. Reactivity is not authenticity. It's emotional dysregulation. Being authentic means feeling your emotions fully, but responding from a place of conscious choice, not uncontrolled impulse. Maybe you grew up seeing your parents express anger through verbal attacks, slamming doors, punitive silences, and unconsciously learned that this is the honest way to deal with difficult emotions. Or maybe you went to the opposite extreme. Seeing all this destructive intensity, you decided to never explode like them. But now you repress your emotions so much that you live with constant internal pressure, like a pressure cooker about to explode. Both extremes are problematic because both are reactions to the toxic environment you grew up in, not conscious choices of who you really are. The authentic person that exists underneath all this programming knows how to feel anger without destroying relationships, knows how to express sadness without manipulating others, knows how to maintain firm boundaries without needing to scream. This real person in you understands that true strength is not explosion. It's the ability to remain centered amid others' emotional chaos. That authenticity is not reactivity. It's the courage to be vulnerable without being destructive. But to access this authentic version of yourself, first you need to understand how they sabotaged your ability to have internal boundaries. The eighth and most fundamental narcissistic strategy was preventing you from developing internal boundaries, that basic capacity to know where you end and others begin. Narcissistic parents operate as if you were an extension of them, not a separate person. Your feelings, your time, your energy, your experiences, everything was open for invasion, judgment, and control. You were never authorized to have a private mental space. Dr. Gabor Mate teaches that boundaries are not walls to keep people away, they're gates to let the right people in. But how can you build healthy gates if you were never taught you have the right to your own territory? Internal boundaries mean knowing you're not responsible for other people's emotions, that someone's opinion of you is not more important than your own opinion of yourself, that you can love someone without accepting destructive behavior. But when you try to establish these basic boundaries, overwhelming guilt dominates you. An internal voice whispers, "You're being cruel, you're being selfish, you're abandoning those who love you." This voice is not your conscience. It's the narcissistic programming still active, trying to keep you in the role of other people's emotional extension. Maybe you've tried telling your parents, "I don't want to discuss politics during dinner." And the response was, "Why do you have to be so sensitive? Real family talks about everything." As if your right to mental peace were a betrayal of family values. Or maybe you tried saying, "I need time to process this before responding." And you heard, "You're rejecting me after everything I did for you." As if establishing a boundary were a personal attack. The result is that you might have reached adulthood completely confused about where your basic rights as a human being are. You don't know you can say no without justifying yourself. You don't know you can have different feelings from others without being wrong. You don't know you can choose your battles. But here's the liberating truth. Healthy boundaries don't destroy relationships. They save relationships. People who truly love you will respect your boundaries. Those who get irritated with your boundaries are revealing that they see you as their extension, not as an independent person. And this brings us to the final revelation, the most important one of all. The final and most devastating strategy of narcissistic parents was to completely replace your authentic self with what I call the family superego, an artificial version of you programmed to serve the family's needs, never your own. This family superego functions like a sophisticated virus. It mimics your personality, but all its preferences are calibrated to please others. All its values are designed to avoid conflict. All its choices are calculated to keep you trapped in the family system. Dr. Gabor Mate reminds us that the question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. And the pain you carry is not just from what was done to you, it's from what was stolen from you, your own essence. Your true self still exists. It's buried under layers of programming, but it hasn't been destroyed. It's the part of you that feels restless when you're living the life others expect. It's the voice that whispers, "This isn't me," when you're on autopilot of compliance. Recovering this authentic self is not about becoming a perfect person. It's about becoming a real person. Real means having bad days without pretending everything's okay. Real means liking things your parents don't approve of. Real means having firm boundaries even when it disappoints people. The journey back to yourself isn't easy. It requires you to question decades of programming, to face the guilt and anxiety that arise when you choose your needs, to withstand the pressure from family members who prefer the controllable version of you. But on the other side of this journey is something worth any difficulty, the experience of finally being at home inside your own skin, of making decisions that make sense to you, of building relationships based on who you really are, not on who you pretend to be. If this video touched something deep inside you, leave a comment telling which of these strategies impacted you most. Your experience can help someone who is still discovering these truths. And if you're ready to dive deeper into this journey of self-discovery, subscribe to the channel. Because you deserve more than surviving your childhood. You deserve to thrive as the unique and valuable person you always were. Your emotional freedom starts now.